Picture this. You're scrolling through social media at 2 a.m., watching someone your age traveling the world while you're stuck in the same routine, dreaming of a life that feels perpetually out of reach. That hollow ache in your chest. That's your eternal child crying out from within. And what I'm about to reveal might just shatter everything you thought you knew about growing up. You see, there's a psychological trap that's keeping millions of people stuck in a limbo between childhood dreams and adult reality. It's called the Puer Aeternus, and chances are, it's been silently sabotaging your life for years. But here's the kicker: understanding this hidden force could be the key to unlocking a version of yourself you never knew existed. Before we dive deep into this rabbit hole, hit that like button if you've ever felt caught between who you want to be and who you think you should be. And subscribe, because we're about to embark on a journey that could fundamentally change how you see yourself and your place in this world. Now let me tell you about Sarah. She's 32, highly educated, and has changed careers 6 times in the past decade. Every few months she discovers a new passion: photography, coding, yoga instruction, sustainable farming. Each time she dives in headfirst, convinced this is finally it. But within months, the initial excitement fades and she's back to scrolling job boards, chasing the next shiny opportunity. Sarah isn't lazy or unfocused. She's trapped by one of the most misunderstood psychological patterns of our time. She's living under the spell of the eternal child, that part of us that craves infinite possibilities while simultaneously running from the commitment required to make any single possibility real. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who first identified this pattern, didn't see the Puer Aeternus as simply immaturity. He recognized it as something far more complex and potentially devastating. It's a psychological archetype that promises everything while delivering nothing. It whispers sweet lies about endless tomorrows while stealing the very foundation needed to build a meaningful today. Think about the last time you abandoned a project right before it got difficult. But here's what Jung understood that most people miss. This isn't about becoming a corporate drone or abandoning your dreams. It's about understanding why you're afraid to commit to anything long enough to make it extraordinary. Let me share something that might shock you. The eternal child doesn't just affect your career choices. It infiltrates every area of your life. Your relationships become a series of intense beginnings followed by mysterious endings. You fall hard and fast, then find reasons to pull away the moment things get real. You collect friends but struggle with intimacy. You chase experiences but struggle with depth. In the dating world, you're either the person who ghosts when someone wants to get serious, or you're attracted to people who do exactly that to you. You crave connection but fear being truly known. You want love but panic at the thought of being responsible for someone else's happiness. Your living situation reflects this too. Maybe you're still renting because buying feels too permanent. Or you've decorated your space like a college dorm room because real furniture feels like giving up on spontaneity. You keep your options open, but slowly, you realize that all those open doors lead to empty rooms. Now, before you start thinking this is just about millennials who refuse to grow up, let me tell you about Marcus. He's 55, married for 20 years, and has built a successful consulting business. But every few years, he goes through what his wife calls his phases. He'll suddenly become obsessed with motorcycles, or decide he wants to learn Italian, or announce plans to hike the Appalachian Trail. He throws himself into these pursuits with the intensity of a teenager, spending thousands of dollars and countless hours, only to abandon them when the initial rush wears off. Marcus's eternal child isn't about refusing to take on responsibility. He's got plenty of that. It's about his relationship with commitment itself. Even in the midst of a successful life, part of him is always scanning the horizon for the next escape route. This is the insidious nature of the Puer Aeternus. It doesn't just affect the stereotypical Peter Pan, who refuses to grow up. It can coexist with external success, marriage, and social responsibility, while quietly undermining your ability to find deep satisfaction in any of it. Comment below if you recognize yourself in Sarah or Marcus. And if you're thinking, this sounds like everyone I know, you're not wrong. We're living in a culture that has turned the eternal child from a psychological quirk into a way of life. Social media feeds us a constant stream of other people's highlight reels, making us feel like we're missing out on infinite possibilities. The gig economy tells us that loyalty is outdated, and we should always be ready to pivot. Self-help culture preaches that if you're not growing, you're dying, creating an addiction to change for its own sake. But here's the trap. In a world of infinite options, choosing anything feels like closing doors. So we hover in a state of perpetual potential, like a quantum particle that collapses into disappointment the moment we observe it too closely. Jung called this the provisional life, living as if your real life is always about to begin. Next month when you start that course, next year when you move to that city, when you meet the right person, find the right job, lose those last 10 pounds. The provisional life is seductive because it allows you to maintain the illusion of unlimited potential without ever risking the possibility of limited results. Let me tell you something that changed my entire perspective on this. The eternal child isn't the enemy. It's a brilliant psychological defense mechanism that served an important purpose. In childhood, it protected your sense of wonder, creativity, and possibility in the face of a world that often tried to crush those qualities. The problem is when this mechanism outlives its usefulness and begins to imprison the very thing it was meant to protect. Think of it like this. Imagine your psyche as a house. The eternal child is like a security system installed during childhood to protect the most precious rooms, your dreams, your creativity, your sense of magic. But now you're an adult trying to live in this house, and the security system has gone haywire. It's not just protecting those rooms anymore, it's locking you out of them entirely. Every time you try to commit to something deeply enough to make it real, the alarm goes off. Warning, warning, commitment detected. This could lead to limitation, abort mission. And so you back away, telling yourself you're keeping your options open, when really you're keeping yourself empty. The cruel irony is that in trying to preserve infinite possibility, the eternal child destroys all possibility. It's like someone who's so afraid of spending money that they keep it all in a jar under their mattress, not realizing that their fear of loss is guaranteeing they'll never gain anything. But Jung didn't just identify this pattern to discourage us. He mapped out a path through it. He called it individuation, the process of becoming who you really are, not who you think you should be or who you're afraid to be, but who you authentically are when all the masks come off. Individuation isn't about killing the eternal child. It's about integrating it. It's about learning to harness its energy without being enslaved by its fears. It's about discovering that true freedom isn't the absence of commitment. It's the ability to choose your commitments consciously and then honor them deeply. Here's where it gets really interesting. Jung discovered that the eternal child is actually in a relationship with its opposite, what he called the senex, or the old man archetype. The senex represents structure, tradition, discipline, and limitation. Most people think these two are enemies, locked in eternal combat, but Jung realized something profound. They need each other. The eternal child without the senex is chaos, all energy, no direction. It's like having a sports car with no steering wheel. The senex without the eternal child is death, all structure, no life. It's like having a steering wheel with no engine. Integration means learning to be both the dreamer and the builder, the visionary and the architect. Let me share a story that illustrates this perfectly. There was a woman named Elena who epitomized the eternal child. She was 28 and had lived in 7 different cities, tried 12 different careers, and was fluent in 4 languages, but had never used any of them professionally. She came to therapy because she felt like she was wasting her life, but every suggestion for how to focus felt like a prison sentence. Alina's breakthrough came when she realized she wasn't afraid of commitment. She was afraid of the wrong commitment. She had been so terrified of choosing something that turned out to be wrong that she had been choosing nothing at all. But here's what changed everything. She started to understand that there is no right choice. There are only choices you make right through the depth of your commitment to them. Alina decided to commit to one thing for 1 year, no matter what. She chose translation work, not because it was perfect, but because it was good enough and allowed her to use her language skills. For the first 3 months, the eternal child raged. It showed her every other possibility she was missing. It whispered that she was wasting her potential. It created elaborate fantasies about all the adventures she could be having instead. But Alina held firm, and something magical happened. As she went deeper into translation work, she discovered layers of complexity and beauty she had never noticed when she was just skimming the surface. She developed expertise, which led to more interesting projects, which led to connections with fascinating people, which led to opportunities she could never have imagined when she was frantically cycling through options. By the end of the year, Alina had discovered something profound. Depth is more satisfying than breadth. Commitment doesn't close doors. It opens different doors, better doors, doors that only become visible when you stop running long enough to see them. This is the secret that the eternal child doesn't want you to know. Mastery is magic. There's nothing more thrilling than becoming genuinely good at something. Nothing more fulfilling than building something that lasts. Nothing more satisfying than keeping a promise to yourself over time. But let's be honest about what this journey looks like in practice, because it's not a smooth, Instagram-worthy transformation. The process of integrating the eternal child is messy, uncomfortable, and often frustrating. It requires you to sit with feelings that every fiber of your being wants to escape. When you first start committing to something deeply, the eternal child throws what Jung called a shadow tantrum. It will do everything in its power to sabotage your efforts. It will make you doubt your choices, show you every flaw in your current path, and seduce you with visions of greener grass elsewhere. This is why most people give up right at the moment when breakthrough is possible. They interpret the discomfort of growth as evidence that they're on the wrong path, when actually it's evidence that they're finally on a path at all. The key is to recognize these shadow tantrums for what they are, not genuine guidance, but resistance to change. It's like your immune system attacking a beneficial organ transplant. The eternal child perceives commitment as a threat to its existence, not understanding that integration means evolution, not annihilation. One of the most powerful techniques Jung developed for working with this resistance is what he called active imagination. Instead of trying to silence the eternal child's protests, you dialogue with them. You acknowledge their fears, understand their concerns, and then gently but firmly explain why growth is necessary. Here's how this might sound in practice. I hear you, eternal child. You're afraid that if I commit to this relationship, I'll lose my freedom. You're scared that if I choose this career path, I'll miss out on other opportunities. I understand your fears, and I'm grateful for how you've protected me. But I need you to trust me now. True freedom isn't the absence of choice. It's the power to choose consciously and then honor that choice fully. This isn't just psychological mumbo-jumbo. This is a practical technique that allows you to acknowledge your resistance without being controlled by it. It's the difference between being hijacked by your fears and being informed by them. As you practice this integration, something remarkable begins to happen. The eternal child stops being your enemy and becomes your ally. Its energy, creativity, and sense of possibility don't disappear. They become focused. Instead of being scattered across 1,000 half-hearted attempts, They become concentrated into whatever you've chosen to commit to. This is what Jung meant by the union of opposites. You don't become boring or conventional when you integrate the eternal child. You become powerful. You become someone who can dream big and make those dreams real. You become someone who can maintain wonder while building something lasting. Let me tell you about David, a perfect example of this integration. David spent his 20s bouncing between startup ideas, never finishing any of them. He had notebooks full of business plans, prototype sketches, and half-built websites. His friends jokingly called him the idea guy, but David was secretly ashamed of his inability to follow through. At 31, David made a decision that terrified him. He chose one idea, a simple app for local musicians to find gigs, and committed to working on it for 2 years minimum, regardless of how he felt about it day to day. The first 6 months were brutal. The eternal child showed him every other app that was getting funded, every other opportunity he was missing, every way his chosen project was flawed. But David persisted. He learned to code properly instead of just dabbling. He talked to hundreds of musicians to understand their real needs. He failed, iterated, failed again, and iterated again. By the end of year 1, his app was being used by over 1,000 musicians in his city. By the end of year 2, he had received his first investment offer. But here's the most interesting part. David discovered that the discipline of commitment had actually made him more creative, not less. When he was constantly switching projects, his creativity was shallow, lots of initial ideas but no deep innovation. When he committed to one project, he was forced to go deeper, to find creative solutions to complex problems, to develop a level of expertise that allowed for true innovation. This is the paradox that the eternal child can't comprehend. Limitation is liberation. When you remove the option to escape at the first sign of difficulty, you discover capabilities you never knew you had. When you commit to one path, you discover depths in that path that were invisible from the surface. Now, I want to address something that might be making you uncomfortable right now. You might be thinking, but what if I choose wrong? What if I commit to the wrong thing and waste years of my life? This fear is so common that Jung had a specific term for it: the tyranny of possibilities. The tyranny of possibilities is the belief that there's one perfect choice out there, and if you don't find it, you're doomed to mediocrity. This belief is what keeps people paralyzed in the eternal child state, always searching, never choosing, always preparing, never acting. But here's a truth that might set you free. There is no perfect choice. There are only choices you can make perfect through your commitment to them. The magic isn't in finding the right path. It's in making whatever path you choose into the right path through the depth of your engagement with it. Think about the most successful, fulfilled people you know. Did they succeed because they made perfect choices? Or did they succeed because they made good enough choices and then committed to them so fully that they became extraordinary? Steve Jobs didn't succeed because he chose the perfect industry. He succeeded because he chose the computer industry and then committed to it so deeply that he transformed it. Maya Angelou didn't become a great writer because writing was her obvious calling. She worked as a cook, a streetcar conductor, and a dancer before finding her way to words. But when she committed to writing, she brought all of her life experience into that commitment, creating something truly unique. This brings us to another crucial insight about the eternal child. It's often hiding a deeper fear than the fear of choosing wrong. It's hiding the fear of being ordinary. The eternal child would rather maintain the illusion of unlimited potential than risk discovering it has ordinary human limitations. But here's what Jung understood about ordinariness. It's an illusion. There is no such thing as an ordinary person living an extraordinary commitment. When you go deep enough into anything truly deep, with genuine dedication and presence, you discover that everything is extraordinary. The barista who has spent 10 years perfecting his craft doesn't make ordinary coffee. The teacher who has spent 15 years learning how to truly connect with students doesn't have an ordinary classroom. The accountant who has spent 20 years mastering her field doesn't do ordinary work. Depth transforms everything. The eternal child can't see this because it's allergic to staying in one place long enough to discover depth. It's like someone who only ever tastes the first bite of every dish and then concludes that food is boring. The richness, the complexity, the true flavors only emerge when you slow down and savor. This fear of ordinariness often manifests as what I call specialness addiction. The eternal child becomes addicted to feeling special, unique, different from everyone else. But this addiction to specialness actually prevents you from discovering your true uniqueness. The uniqueness that emerges when you stop trying to be special and start trying to be genuine. Your true uniqueness isn't in your potential. Everyone has potential. It's in how you actualize that potential. It's in the specific way you bring your gifts into the world through sustained, committed action. It's in the unique fingerprint you leave on whatever you choose to touch deeply. Let me share one more story that illustrates this beautifully. Maria was a graphic designer who epitomized the eternal child's fear of ordinariness. She constantly compared herself to design superstars on Instagram, convinced that unless she was creating viral campaigns or winning international awards, she was wasting her talent. This perfectionism paralyzed her. She would start projects and abandon them halfway through because they weren't groundbreaking enough. She would take jobs and quit them after a few months because the work felt too commercial. She was so afraid of being ordinary that she was becoming invisible. Maria's transformation began when she accepted a position designing marketing materials for a local nonprofit that helped homeless veterans. The work seemed unglamorous to her eternal child, but Maria committed to doing it exceptionally well. She spent time with the veterans learning their stories. She researched the unique challenges they faced. She poured genuine care into every flyer, every poster, every brochure. Something beautiful happened. Maria's work, informed by real human connection and genuine purpose, began to resonate in ways her attempts at viral design never had. Her campaigns for the nonprofit started winning local awards. Other nonprofits started seeking her out. Gradually, Maria built a reputation not as a flashy designer, but as someone who could create work that genuinely moved people. Today, Maria runs a successful agency that specializes in cause-based design. She discovered that her uniqueness wasn't in being different from everyone else. It was in bringing her specific blend of creativity, empathy, and technical skill to work that mattered to her. Her ordinariness, her simple human desire to help others, became the foundation for something extraordinary. This is the ultimate lesson of integrating the eternal child. Your greatest strength isn't in your ability to be different, but in your willingness to be authentic. And authenticity requires commitment. It requires staying in one place long enough to discover who you really are when the masks come off. Now, let's talk about what this integration process actually looks like in your daily life, because I want to give you practical tools you can use starting today. The first step is what Jung called holding the tension. When you feel the eternal child's urge to escape, to change course, to chase something new and shiny, you don't immediately act on it, but you don't suppress it either. You hold the tension. You sit with the discomfort of wanting to be somewhere else while staying committed to where you are. This is harder than it sounds because our culture has taught us that discomfort is always a signal to change something. But sometimes discomfort is a signal that you're finally doing something meaningful. The gym is uncomfortable, but that discomfort is how you build strength. Learning a new skill is uncomfortable, but that discomfort is how you expand your capabilities. Commitment is uncomfortable, but that discomfort is how you build a life. Holding the tension means developing what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to experience difficult emotions without immediately trying to escape them. This is a skill you can practice in small ways throughout your day. When you're in a boring meeting, instead of immediately reaching for your phone, see if you can stay present with the boredom. When you're working on a project that's lost its initial excitement, see if you can stay engaged with the mundane parts. When you're in a relationship conversation that feels difficult, see if you can stay in the conversation instead of finding ways to deflect or distract. These small practices build your capacity for larger commitments. They train your nervous system to tolerate the discomfort that inevitably comes with depth and meaning. The second tool is what I call the practice of enough. The eternal child is always looking for more and more options, more excitement, more possibilities. But integration requires learning to find richness in what you already have. This doesn't mean settling for mediocrity or giving up on growth. It means learning to appreciate depth over breadth, quality over quantity, mastery over novelty. It means discovering that the grass isn't greener on the other side. It's greener where you water it. Practice this by picking one area of your life and committing to finding more depth there instead of seeking more breadth. If you're a runner who's always trying new routes, commit to running the same route for a month and see what you notice when you're not distracted by novelty. If you're someone who's always reading new books, commit to reading one book multiple times and see what depths emerge. The third tool is building what Jung called symbolic attitude. This means learning to see your commitments not just as practical choices, but as symbolic expressions of who you're becoming. When you stay in a difficult relationship conversation, you're not just resolving a conflict, you're symbolically choosing connection over isolation. When you persist with a challenging project, you're not just completing a task, you're symbolically choosing creation over consumption. This symbolic perspective helps you stay motivated when the practical benefits aren't immediately apparent. It helps you understand that every act of commitment is actually an act of self-creation. But let's talk about what happens when you get this integration wrong, because the path isn't always smooth, and there are some common pitfalls that can derail your progress. The first pitfall is what I call rigid commitment. This happens when people hear about the importance of commitment and swing too far in the opposite direction. They become afraid to ever change anything, mistaking rigidity for dedication. They stay in jobs that are genuinely terrible, relationships that are actually harmful, or situations that have outlived their usefulness, all in the name of integration. True integration isn't about never changing course. It's about changing course consciously rather than compulsively. It's about making decisions from a place of clarity rather than anxiety. It's about leaving things when you've learned what they have to teach you, not running from them the moment they become challenging. The difference is subtle but crucial. When the eternal child wants to leave something, it's usually because the thing has become difficult or boring. When an integrated person leaves something, it's usually because they've grown beyond what the situation can offer them. The second pitfall is spiritual bypassing. This happens when people use concepts like following your passion or trusting the universe to justify their inability to commit. They tell themselves they're being authentic or intuitive, when really they're just being avoidant. True spirituality doesn't exempt you from the work of commitment. If anything, it demands deeper commitment to growth, to service, to becoming who you're capable of being. The universe doesn't want you to float through life sampling everything and mastering nothing. It wants you to dive deep, to contribute, to leave something behind that wasn't there before you arrived. The third pitfall is comparison paralysis. This happens when people become so focused on what others are doing that they lose sight of their own path. They see someone else's success and assume they made the wrong choice, forgetting that success comes from depth of commitment, not perfection of choice. Social media makes this pitfall particularly dangerous because we're constantly exposed to everyone else's highlight reels. We see the photographer who's traveling the world and wonder if we should have chosen creativity over stability. We see the entrepreneur who's building a startup and wonder if we should have chosen innovation over security. We see the spiritual teacher who's found enlightenment and wonder if we should have chosen inner work over outer achievement. But here's the truth. Every path has its shadows, every choice has its costs, and every success story is built on a foundation of ordinary, daily commitment that's rarely showcased on social media. The integrated person learns to use others' successes as inspiration rather than comparison. They ask not, "Why didn't I choose their path?" but "How can I bring their level of commitment to my own path?" This brings us to one of the most profound aspects of integration. It changes your relationship not just with commitment, but with time itself. The eternal child lives in what Jung called circular time, a cyclical pattern of beginning, excitement, difficulty, and abandonment that repeats endlessly. The integrated person learns to live in linear time, a sense of progression, development, and building towards something larger than themselves. Circular time is seductive because it's always promising a fresh start. Linear time is challenging because it asks you to build on yesterday's foundation rather than starting from scratch. But linear time is where real magic happens. It's where small daily actions compound into extraordinary results. It's where relationships deepen into genuine intimacy. It's where skills develop into artistry. When you shift from circular time to linear time, you stop seeing your life as a series of disconnected episodes and start seeing it as a coherent story. You start making decisions not just based on how you feel today, but based on who you're becoming over time. This shift is profound and often uncomfortable for the eternal child, which is why many people resist it so strongly. It requires giving up the fantasy of infinite fresh starts in favor of the reality of continuous development. It requires accepting that you are accountable not just for today's choices, but for the accumulation of all your choices over time. But this accountability isn't a burden, it's empowerment. When you realize that your daily choices are building something larger, every choice becomes meaningful. When you understand that time is linear, not circular, you stop wasting it on meaningless pursuits and start investing it in what matters. Let me tell you about Kevin, whose story perfectly illustrates this shift. Kevin was 40 and had been playing guitar as a hobby for 20 years. He would practice intensely for a few months, then get distracted by life and put the guitar away for months at a time. He had been cycling through this pattern for 2 decades, always feeling like a beginner, always frustrated by his lack of progress. Kevin's transformation came when he shifted from circular time to linear time. Instead of trying to practice for hours when he was motivated, he committed to practicing for just 15 minutes every single day, regardless of how he felt. Instead of setting dramatic goals like learning to play like Hendrix, he set small, cumulative goals like learning 1 new chord per week. The change was remarkable. Within 6 months of consistent daily practice, Kevin had made more progress than in the previous 20 years of sporadic intensive efforts. But more importantly, his relationship with the guitar had changed. It was no longer a hobby that he picked up and put down based on his mood. It had become a practice, a discipline, a part of who he was. Kevin discovered something that the eternal child can't understand. Consistency is more powerful than intensity. Small actions repeated over time create exponential results. This is true for everything: relationships, career development, health, creativity, spiritual growth. The eternal child wants dramatic transformation, the mountaintop experience, the sudden breakthrough, the overnight success. The integrated person understands that real transformation happens slowly, quietly, through the accumulation of small choices made consistently over time. This brings us to another crucial aspect of integration: learning to find excitement in the mundane. The eternal child is addicted to novelty, always needing something new to feel engaged. The integrated person learns to find novelty within commitment, excitement within routine, adventure within discipline. This isn't about becoming boring or giving up on excitement. It's about discovering a deeper kind of excitement, the excitement of mastery, the thrill of depth, the adventure of seeing how far you can go when you stop jumping from thing to thing. When you commit deeply to something, you discover that there are infinite layers to explore. The martial artist who studies the same basic movements for decades isn't bored. They're discovering new subtleties, new applications, new depths of understanding. The writer who explores the same themes over multiple books isn't stuck. They're going deeper into territory that matters to them. This is what the eternal child misses when it's always chasing the next shiny object. It's like someone who only ever looks at the surface of the ocean and concludes that water is boring, never discovering the incredible ecosystem that exists in the depths. Now, let's talk about how this integration affects your relationships, because this is where the eternal child causes some of its most profound damage. The eternal child approaches relationships the same way it approaches everything else, with intense initial excitement followed by restless disappointment when reality sets in. It falls in love with potential rather than reality, creates fantasy bonds rather than genuine connections, and runs away the moment genuine intimacy requires genuine commitment. This pattern is devastating not just for romantic relationships, but for all relationships. The eternal child collects friends but struggles with friendship. It enjoys the excitement of meeting new people, but finds the maintenance of long-term relationships boring. It wants to be known but fears being truly seen. Integration changes everything about how you relate to others. When you learn to commit to yourself, you become capable of committing to others. When you learn to work through your own resistance and discomfort, you become capable of working through conflict and challenge in relationships. More importantly, you stop looking to relationships to provide the excitement and novelty that the eternal child craves. You stop expecting other people to entertain you and start bringing your own sense of engagement to the relationship. You stop hoping others will complete you and start showing up as a complete person who chooses to share your completeness with others. This shift is profound for everyone around you. When you stop being the person who disappears when things get real, people start trusting you differently. When you stop being the person who's always looking for the next best thing, people start feeling safe to be vulnerable with you. When you stop treating relationships as entertainment, people start experiencing them as sanctuary. But this integration isn't just about romantic relationships. It affects how you relate to your family, your friends, your colleagues, even strangers. When you integrate the eternal child, you become someone who can be counted on, someone who follows through, someone who stays present even when presence is uncomfortable. Let me share the story of Rachel, whose relationship pattern perfectly illustrates the eternal child's effect on love. Rachel was 35 and had been in 17 relationships over the past 20 years. Each one followed the same pattern: intense attraction, passionate beginning, gradual disillusionment, and sudden ending. Rachel would fall for someone's potential, the artist who was going to be discovered, the entrepreneur who was going to change the world, the spiritual seeker who was going to find enlightenment. She would project her own unlived dreams onto these partners, creating a fantasy bond that felt incredibly intense but was ultimately built on illusion. When reality inevitably intruded, when the artist struggled with self-doubt, when the entrepreneur faced setbacks, when the spiritual seeker revealed ordinary human flaws, Rachel would feel betrayed. These people weren't who she thought they were. They weren't living up to their potential. They were disappointing her. What Rachel didn't realize was that she was approaching relationships the same way she approached everything else in her life, looking for the perfect option rather than learning to love imperfection deeply. She was in love with the idea of love rather than the reality of loving an actual, flawed, complex human being. Rachel's transformation began when she started working on her own eternal child patterns. As she learned to commit to her own growth consistently rather than in dramatic bursts, she began to understand what real commitment looked like. As she learned to work through her own resistance and discomfort rather than running from it, she began to develop the skills needed for genuine intimacy. When Rachel met Tom, something was different. Tom wasn't particularly exciting by her old standards. He was a middle school teacher who loved his job but wasn't trying to change the world. He was steady, kind, and wonderfully ordinary. The eternal child in Rachel initially dismissed him as not special enough. But Rachel had learned to distrust her eternal child's judgment. She decided to give the relationship 6 months, committing to staying present and engaged even when her old patterns wanted to run. She discovered something revolutionary. Ordinary love is extraordinary when you bring your full presence to it. Tom's steadiness wasn't boring, it was peaceful. His commitment to his students wasn't unambitious, it was inspiring. His contentment with a simple life wasn't settling, it was wisdom. Rachel discovered that she had been so busy looking for someone extraordinary that she had never learned to see the extraordinary in anyone. More importantly, Tom loved Rachel not for her potential, but for who she actually was, including her flaws, her struggles, and her ordinary human limitations. This was terrifying for the eternal child, which had always hidden behind the mask of potential. But it was liberating for Rachel's authentic self, which had been waiting her whole life to be seen and loved for who she really was. Today, Rachel and Tom have been together for 8 years. Their relationship isn't perfect. They have ordinary disagreements, ordinary stresses, ordinary moments of boredom. But their love has a depth that Rachel's previous relationships never achieved. It's built not on fantasy and projection, but on genuine knowledge, acceptance, and commitment. This is what the eternal child can never understand. Real love isn't about finding the perfect person. It's about learning to love imperfection perfectly. It's about choosing someone and then choosing them again every day, even when they disappoint you, even when they're difficult, even when they're ordinary. Now, let's address something that might be troubling you as you consider this path of integration. You might be wondering, if I integrate the eternal child, will I lose my creativity? Will I become boring? Will I turn into the kind of person I used to look down on? This is one of the eternal child's favorite fears to whisper in your ear. It wants you to believe that commitment equals death, that structure equals stagnation, that choosing one path means abandoning all creativity and spontaneity. But Jung discovered something counterintuitive. Integration actually enhances creativity rather than diminishing it. When you stop dispersing your creative energy across 1,000 half-hearted attempts, you can focus it into something truly innovative. When you stop being afraid of limitation, you can use limitation as a creative constraint that actually sparks more original thinking. Think about the greatest artists in history. Were they people who dabbled in everything and mastered nothing? Or were they people who committed deeply to their craft and found infinite creative possibilities within that commitment? Picasso painted for over 70 years, constantly innovating within the medium of paint and canvas. Miles Davis played jazz for decades, revolutionizing the genre multiple times while never abandoning music. Shakespeare wrote plays and sonnets his entire career, finding endless ways to explore human nature within those structures. These artists didn't become great by keeping all their options open. They became great by choosing one area and going so deep that they discovered new territories no one had ever explored before. Their commitment didn't limit their creativity. It focused it into something extraordinary. The same is true for any area of life. The entrepreneur who commits to one industry long enough to truly understand it is more likely to create genuine innovation than the entrepreneur who jumps from industry to industry chasing trends. The teacher who commits to one subject long enough to master it is more likely to find creative ways to inspire students than the teacher, who's always looking for the next exciting curriculum. This is because creativity isn't about having infinite options. It's about finding infinite possibilities within chosen constraints. When you remove the option to escape, you're forced to dig deeper, to think more creatively, to find solutions you never would have discovered if you were always looking for the exit. But integration doesn't just enhance creativity. It also preserves the eternal child's best qualities while transforming its destructive patterns. You don't lose your sense of wonder when you integrate the eternal child. You learn to bring wonder to whatever you're committed to. You don't lose your playfulness. You learn to play deeply rather than superficially. You don't lose your spontaneity. You learn to be spontaneous within structure rather than using spontaneity to avoid structure. Let me tell you about James, a perfect example of how integration preserves creativity while eliminating chaos. James was a graphic designer who epitomized the eternal child's relationship with creativity. He would get excited about a project, work on it intensively for a few days or weeks, then abandon it the moment he hit any obstacle or lost the initial excitement. James had hundreds of half-finished designs, incomplete portfolios, and abandoned client projects. He told himself he was too creative to work within deadlines and constraints. He believed that structure would kill his artistic soul. As a result, he was broke, professionally unreliable, and secretly deeply frustrated with the gap between his creative vision and his actual output. James's transformation began when he accepted a full-time position at a design agency, something his eternal child saw as selling out. The job required him to work within tight deadlines, client constraints, and team collaboration. Initially, James was miserable. Every fiber of his being wanted to quit and go back to his free, creative lifestyle. But as James forced himself to work within these constraints, something unexpected happened. The limitations actually sparked his creativity in new ways. When he couldn't rely on his mood or inspiration to get work done, he had to develop professional techniques and systematic approaches. When he had to meet client needs rather than just expressing his personal vision, he had to stretch his creative muscles in directions he had never explored. Within 6 months, James had produced more finished, polished work than in the previous 3 years of free creativity. More importantly, his work had improved dramatically. The discipline of working within constraints had forced him to develop skills and perspectives he never would have developed while floating from project to project. Today, James runs his own successful design studio. He's learned to impose structure on himself, setting deadlines, committing to projects even when they become challenging, and finding creative solutions within real-world constraints. His creativity hasn't been diminished by integration. It's been amplified and focused into something genuinely valuable. This is the paradox that the eternal child can't grasp. Freedom exists within structure, not despite it. A jazz musician's improvisation is only as good as their understanding of musical structure. A poet's free verse is only as powerful as their mastery of language. An entrepreneur's innovation is only as valuable as their understanding of market constraints. When you integrate the eternal child, you don't become less creative, you become more effectively creative. You don't lose your spark, you learn to tend it into a sustainable flame rather than letting it burn out in quick, dramatic bursts. Now, let's talk about what this integration means for your relationship with work and career, because this is where many people feel the eternal child's influence most acutely. The eternal child approaches career the same way it approaches everything else, always looking for the perfect job, the ideal opportunity, the magical career that will provide unlimited fulfillment without any of the ordinary challenges that come with actual work. This leads to chronic job hopping, constant career changes, and perpetual dissatisfaction. The eternal child gets excited about a new position, imagines it will solve all their problems, then becomes disillusioned when it turns out to involve actual work with actual difficulties and ordinary people with ordinary limitations. But here's what the eternal child misses. There is no perfect job. Every career has its challenges, its boring aspects, its frustrating moments. The question isn't whether you'll encounter difficulties. It's whether you'll develop the capacity to work through difficulties in service of something meaningful. When you integrate the eternal child in your career, you stop looking for the job that will make you happy and start asking how you can bring happiness, or at least engagement and purpose, to whatever job you choose. You stop waiting for inspiration to strike and start showing up professionally regardless of how you feel. You stop expecting work to be constantly exciting and start finding satisfaction in craftsmanship, competence, and contribution. This doesn't mean settling for a job you hate or giving up on career growth. It means approaching your career with the maturity to understand that fulfillment comes from how you work, not just what you work on. It means developing the capacity to find meaning in mundane tasks and to persist through challenges rather than running from them. One of the most powerful shifts that happens with integration is moving from a consumer mentality to a contributor mentality. The eternal child approaches work asking, "What can this job give me?" The integrated person approaches work asking, "What can I give to this work?" This shift is transformative because it puts you in control of your satisfaction. When you're focused on what your job can give you, your happiness depends on external circumstances beyond your control. When you're focused on what you can give to your job, your satisfaction depends on your own choices, attitudes, and actions. This doesn't mean becoming a doormat or accepting exploitation. It means taking responsibility for the quality of your engagement rather than waiting for perfect conditions to show up fully. It means finding ways to contribute meaningfully even in imperfect situations. Let me share the story of Monica, whose career journey perfectly illustrates this shift. Monica spent her 20s jumping from job to job, always convinced that the next position would be the one that would finally make her happy. She worked in marketing, then switched to nonprofit work, then tried freelance writing, then got into tech, then considered going back to school for psychology. Each transition was motivated by the same pattern: initial excitement followed by gradual disillusionment when the job turned out to involve ordinary work with ordinary challenges. Monica was always looking for the career that would provide constant stimulation, perfect colleagues, ideal working conditions, and unlimited growth opportunities. Monica's transformation began when she realized she was approaching her career like a consumer looking for the perfect product rather than a contributor looking for ways to add value. She decided to commit to her current position, a marketing role at a mid-sized company, for at least 2 years, regardless of how she felt about it day to day. The first 6 months were difficult. Monica's eternal child showed her every other opportunity she was missing, every flaw in her current company, every way her job was beneath her potential. But Monica persisted, focusing not on what the job could give her, but on what she could give to the job. Something remarkable happened. As Monica stopped looking for the exit and started looking for ways to contribute, she began to see opportunities she had never noticed before. She volunteered for projects that no one else wanted. She took initiative in areas that were being neglected. She invested in learning skills that would benefit her team. By the end of her first year, Monica had been promoted. By the end of her second year, she was leading projects that were having real impact on the company's success. She discovered that the job itself hadn't changed. Her approach to the job had changed, and that had made all the difference. Today, Monica is the marketing director at the same company she once considered leaving. She's found genuine satisfaction not because she found the perfect job, but because she learned to perfect her approach to whatever job she had. This is the secret of career satisfaction that the eternal child can never understand. Fulfillment comes from contribution, not consumption. It comes from developing mastery, not chasing novelty. It comes from going deep rather than going broad. But let's talk about what happens when you encounter the eternal child pattern in others, because once you start recognizing it, you'll see it everywhere, in your friends, your family members, your romantic partners, your colleagues. Understanding the eternal child in others can be both enlightening and frustrating. On one hand, it helps you have compassion for people who seem to sabotage their own success or run from good opportunities. On the other hand, it can be exhausting to watch someone you care about repeat the same self-defeating patterns over and over again. The key is to. This is particularly challenging in romantic relationships, where you might be attracted to someone's eternal child qualities, their spontaneity, their dreaminess, their sense of possibility, only to become frustrated when those same qualities prevent them from showing up consistently in the relationship. If you're in a relationship with someone who's struggling with eternal child patterns, the most helpful thing you can do is maintain your own boundaries while avoiding the temptation to enable their avoidance. This means not rescuing them from the consequences of their choices, not making excuses for their inability to commit, and not sacrificing your own needs to accommodate their fear of responsibility. At the same time, it means offering support and encouragement when they do take steps toward growth and integration. It means celebrating small acts of commitment rather than focusing on their failures to follow through. It means recognizing that change is a process, not an event. In friendships, the eternal child pattern might show up as flakiness, unreliability, or a tendency to disappear when life gets real. Again, the key is maintaining your own boundaries while staying open to genuine connection when it's offered. You can't force someone to be a consistent friend, but you can choose how much energy you invest in relationships that aren't reciprocal. In work relationships, you might encounter colleagues who are always looking for the next opportunity, always complaining about current conditions, always starting projects they don't finish. The best approach is to focus on your own work while being supportive of others' growth without becoming responsible for their success. The common thread in all these relationships is the importance of not getting drawn into the eternal child's drama while remaining compassionate about their struggle. The eternal child pattern isn't a character flaw. It's a psychological defense mechanism that served a purpose but has outlived its usefulness. People aren't bad for having this pattern, they're just stuck. But you also don't have to sacrifice your own growth and stability to accommodate someone else's refusal to grow. Compassion doesn't require enabling. Love doesn't require losing yourself. Understanding doesn't require accepting behavior that undermines your own well-being. This brings us to one of the most important aspects of integration, learning to be in relationship with others from a place of wholeness rather than emptiness. When you integrate your own eternal child, you stop looking to relationships to provide what you're not willing to give yourself. You stop expecting others to complete you and start showing up as someone who chooses to share their completeness. This shift changes everything about your relationships. You become less needy and more generous. You become less reactive and more responsive. You become less focused on what you can get and more focused on what you can give. You become someone who can be trusted because you've learned to trust yourself. Now, as we near the end of our journey together, I want to talk about the bigger picture. What your individual integration of the eternal child means for our collective human experience. We're living in a time when eternal child patterns have become epidemic. Our culture promotes instant gratification, endless options, and the avoidance of discomfort. We're encouraged to optimize our lives for pleasure and convenience, to upgrade and update constantly, to never settle for anything less than perfect. Social media amplifies this by showing us curated versions of everyone else's lives, making us feel like we're missing out on infinite possibilities. The gig economy tells us that loyalty is outdated and we should always be ready to pivot. Consumer culture teaches us that happiness can be purchased and that dissatisfaction means we need to buy something new. All of these cultural forces feed the eternal child archetype, making it harder and harder for individuals to develop the capacity for commitment, depth, and sustained engagement. We're creating a society of people who are always becoming but never being, always preparing but never acting, always optimizing but never satisfied. But here's the hopeful truth. Every person who integrates their eternal child becomes a force for cultural change. Every person who learns to commit deeply rather than broadly, to build rather than consume, to contribute rather than just acquire, becomes a model for a different way of living. When you integrate your eternal child, you become someone who can be counted on in a world full of flaky people. You become someone who finishes what they start in a world full of abandoned projects. You become someone who goes deep in a world obsessed with surface. You become someone who stays present in a world that's always looking elsewhere. This isn't just about personal fulfillment, it's about social responsibility. The problems facing our world require sustained commitment, not short-term thinking. Climate change, inequality, political polarization, mental health crises. These challenges can't be solved by people who lose interest when solutions become difficult or boring. We need individuals who can commit to long-term solutions even when they're not glamorous. We need people who can stay engaged with complex problems, even when they don't provide immediate gratification. We need humans who understand that real change happens slowly, through sustained effort over time. When you integrate your eternal child, you become capable of being part of these solutions. You develop the psychological capacity to work on problems that might not be solved in your lifetime. You become willing to plant trees whose shade you'll never enjoy. You become someone who can build institutions and relationships and projects that will outlast your individual existence. This is the ultimate meaning of integration. It's not just about personal happiness, it's about becoming capable of genuine contribution to the human project. It's about developing the depth and stability needed to be truly useful in the world. But this doesn't mean becoming a grim, duty-bound person who's lost all joy and spontaneity. The integrated person doesn't abandon the eternal child's gifts. They channel them into something sustainable and meaningful. They bring wonder to their work, playfulness to their relationships, and creativity to their problem-solving. The difference is that their joy comes from depth rather than novelty. Their excitement comes from mastery rather than consumption. Their sense of adventure comes from exploration within commitment rather than escape from commitment. Think about the people in your life who seem most genuinely happy and fulfilled. Are they the people who are always chasing the next new thing? Or are they the people who have found ways to go deep into what matters to them, whether that's their family, their work, their art, their service to others? The happiest people I know aren't the ones with the most options. They're the ones who have learned to make the most of the options they've chosen. They're not the people with the most exciting lives. They're the people who have learned to find excitement in ordinary things done extraordinarily well. This is what integration offers. Not a more exciting life, but a more meaningful one. Not more possibilities, but deeper actualization of the possibilities you choose. Not constant novelty, but constantly deepening engagement with what you've committed to. As we conclude this exploration, I want to leave you with a final story that encapsulates everything we've discussed. It's the story of Sarah, yes, the same Sarah we met at the beginning, the one who had changed careers 6 times in a decade. Sarah's transformation didn't happen overnight. It took her 3 years of conscious work to integrate her eternal child patterns. During that time, she had to resist the urge to change course dozens of times. She had to sit through countless moments of boredom, frustration, and doubt. She had to learn to find satisfaction in small, daily progress rather than dramatic breakthroughs. But something profound happened. As Sarah committed to photography, not because it was perfect, but because it was good enough and she was determined to make it great through her commitment, she discovered depths in the medium she had never imagined. She developed a unique style that emerged not from talent alone, but from the intersection of her particular perspective and sustained practice. More importantly, Sarah discovered something about herself. She realized that her chronic dissatisfaction hadn't been about choosing the wrong things. It had been about her inability to commit deeply enough to any one thing to discover its true possibilities. She had been like someone who only ever tasted the appetizers at a restaurant and concluded that food was boring, never staying long enough to experience the full meal. Today, Sarah runs a successful photography business specializing in environmental portraits. She's not famous, she's not wealthy, but she's deeply satisfied in a way she never was during her years of constant searching. She found her uniqueness not by being different from everyone else, but by bringing her specific combination of skills, perspective, and commitment to work that matters to her. Sarah's story isn't unique. It's available to anyone willing to do the work of integration. The path isn't easy, but it's simple. Stop running, start committing, and discover the extraordinary depths available in ordinary things when approached with extraordinary dedication. So here's my challenge to you. Identify one area of your life where you've been living in the eternal child pattern. Maybe it's your career, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a creative pursuit, maybe it's your health or personal development. Choose something that matters to you but that you've been approaching with the eternal child's pattern of excitement followed by abandonment. Make a commitment, not a perfect commitment, but a good enough commitment to engage with this area consistently for a specific period of time. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a year, maybe it's longer. The key is to choose a time frame that feels both meaningful and manageable. Then, when the eternal child starts its familiar protest showing you other options, highlighting flaws in your current choice, trying to seduce you back into the provisional life. The world needs more people who can commit, who can build, who can go deep. It needs fewer consumers and more contributors. It needs fewer optimizers and more actualizers. It needs people who understand that freedom isn't the absence of commitment, but the power to choose your commitments consciously and then honor them fully. Your eternal child doesn't need to die, it needs to grow up. And when it does, you'll discover that the very thing you thought would limit you is actually the thing that will set you free. The choice is yours. The time is now. The question is, what will you commit to becoming? If this exploration has resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own experience with the eternal child pattern. Share in the comments below. Where do you see this pattern in your own life? What would change if you approached one area with deeper commitment rather than constant searching? Your insights might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to begin their own journey of integration. And if you found value in this deep dive into Jung's wisdom, subscribe for more explorations of the psychological patterns that shape our lives. Because understanding yourself isn't just about personal growth, it's about becoming capable of contributing to the growth of our world. The eternal child within you is waiting to be integrated, not eliminated. The question is, are you ready to do the work? I've created a comprehensive video narration rewrite that expands significantly on the original Jung content while maintaining its core insights about the Puer Aeternus, eternal child, archetype. The rewrite transforms the academic exploration into an engaging, conversational video script that opens with a compelling hook using social media scrolling to immediately connect with viewers. Includes multiple relatable character stories, Sarah, Marcus, Elena, David, etc. to illustrate the concepts. Significantly expands the content to over 0 characters while maintaining narrative flow. Uses natural, conversational language that sounds human and engaging. Incorporates strategic calls to action throughout, likes, comments. Subscriptions. Provides practical tools and techniques for integration. Explores modern cultural implications including social media, gig economy, and consumer culture. Addresses relationships, career, and personal growth in much greater depth. Video narration that requires no additional introduction or conclusion, exactly as specified in your requirements. The expanded content explores the eternal child pattern through multiple lenses: personal development, relationships, career, creativity, and cultural impact, providing viewers with a comprehensive understanding of how to integrate this archetype for genuine fulfillment and contribution.